This is one of the most successful racing technique tips that works with most of my students, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. It's called the light, firm, light pattern. Let's talk about that. You know that if you trail brake into a corner, it's extremely easy to spin, especially in cars that have open differential. A little bit of braking, a little bit of turning, and you immediately spin. Mid-corner though, it's a little bit more difficult to spin. Let's say you start turning in here and then you try turning the steering a lot, you can see that the car understeers mid-corner. And then on exit, it's also possible to spin the car on exit if you force the car too much like that. It's easy to spin on entry, it's more difficult to spin mid-corner, and it's easy again to spin on exit. So the magic of this is that we can compensate the natural behavior of the car by forcing it only when we need to force the car, and by relaxing our hands and letting the car do its thing when it wants to do its thing. So again, light on entry, firm mid-corner, and then light on exit. You can always do that, and the car is going to be extremely consistent. One very common mistake for beginners is to trail brake with firm hands and immediately spin, just because the brakes always amplify what you're doing with the steering. Every time you start braking, there's so much more weight on the front tires that you get 10 times more rotation from that same steering angle. So every time you apply the brakes, you have to relax your hands the most. And then as you start turning into the corner, you still have some brakes because you're trying to learn trail braking, right? And because there is still a lot of load on the front tires because of the trail braking, you have to start turning in a little bit, because that combination between brakes and steering is already going to be more than enough to rotate the car too much. That is why it's so easy to spin on corner entry when you're trying to learn trail braking. The solution is to really relax your hands on that initial turn in, almost nothing. You can see I'm barely turning and the car is already going into the corner because the brakes are amplifying the effectiveness of that steering. So you try to relax your hands a lot on initial turn in, but then mid-corner here, you can actually turn the car a lot more. You can see how I really forced it, even got a little bit too much understeer there, but I didn't spin. So it's actually safe to push the car when the speeds are super low. Remember, initial turn in, relaxed hands, light, then mid-corner, firm, and then light again on the exit so you don't spin. For example, this is what happens if you force the car too much on corner exit. You get back on power with too much steering, you can easily get a lot of oversteer and just get a bad exit or even spin. The cool thing is that this works for pretty much all corners. Light, firm, and light. And then you go to the next corner, exactly the same thing. As soon as you touch the brakes, you relax your hands more, boom. Then firm, you can turn more, and then you can turn less and less and less at the exit. The car wanted to do its own spiraling out motion. In all long corners, same thing. Light, firmer, and then back on power, relax your hands a little bit. See, understeering a tiny bit. I don't want to force the car because that's going to cause too much crub and the car is gonna go loose. Every corner where you have braking, mid-corner, and acceleration, you can think of the light, firm, light pattern. Another way we could put this is the fact that every time there is influence from the pedals, the steering has to be a lot more precise. Mid-corner is where we have the least amount of pedals, right? We have the least amount of trail braking, and we're about to get back on power, so there's not a lot of weight transfer going on, so you can force the car and you can turn the car more. And also because the speeds are lower, the car is actually able to rotate more because of inertia. But on the extremes of a corner, that is where you should be very careful. Your speeds are very high, and there's a lot of influence from the pedals. There's a lot of influence from the brakes, and from the turn-in, there's a lot of weight on the front tires. So you have to have the least amount of steering necessary to already get the car into a motion, into that, micro oversteer on turn in, because it's going to be very easy. And then on exit, you don't want to force the car because the car is already getting more and more speed, so it's able to rotate less, and because you're already pretty much full throttle. So if you force the car on that late exit phase, you're also going to be in trouble. At the extremes of the corners, you relax your hands. At the middle of the corner with low speeds, you can afford to turn the car a little bit more. Light, firm, light pattern. Here's another very common mistake. You brake a little bit too late and you really obsess about getting that apex. And because you are really forcing the car and trying so much to get the apex, you forget to relax your hands and you brake and turn with two firm hands and you spin. This is what I call hyper obsessing over the apex. If you're a little bit too fast, you have to forget the apex and just respect the balance of the car. If you really focus on that and you still kind of like forget about the light firm light technique, the car's too fast. You're going to spin because you're going to force that extra rotation and the car's not going to be able to do it. Again, if I brake too late, abort the apex, then force the car to the inside and try to compensate by getting a later exit and maybe getting a little bit more speed to not lose so much time. See, a little bit too late. Ooh, respect, relax your hands, do the corrections, because if you just force the car into the apex because you're a little bit too fast, the car is not going to do it and you're going to spin immediately. That is why every time you add brakes, you relax your hands regardless of the line you're taking. If you're going to miss the apex because you're too fast, it's better to miss the apex than to force the car and spin. Here's a good example. I'm going to turn and I'm going to add the brakes without affecting my hands. You can see that the car spins immediately. So what can I do then if I want to brake and turn to trail brake on this long closing radius here? Well, as soon as I touch the brakes, I'm going to relax my hands, and you're going to see what happens. I turn, brake, relax my hands. You see, the car is still going to the inside, just the brakes pretty much are already enough to make the car turn so much, and you can see some counter steer. That's actually not me, that's the force feedback. Why? Because I am relaxing my hands, and I'm just allowing the force feedback to do its job for me. Here, again, without relaxing my hands, immediately spin. And if I do relax my hands, at the very fraction of a second I add my brakes, this happens. See now how the car is pretty much going right and I'm doing some micro corrections. Why am I able to do those micro corrections? Because I'm letting the force feedback do it for me. This is what I call the passive counter steer technique from the motor racing checklist. So again, as soon as I add the brakes, relax my hands. And then I'm just doing a little bit of a counter steer. You see, that was a little bit too much brakes right there, and the car oversteered, and I was barely turning at all to the right. Every time you add the brakes, you relax your hands, light, firm, light pattern. Again, here, the light phase of this corner is pretty long, because you can see that I'm still on the brake all the way until this apex, and then finally here I can force the steering a little bit more and try to get a good exit. So in this big closing radius corner, which is very, very difficult for beginners, the light phase is pretty long. I'm gonna start braking, light, 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 and then again all over deceleration. If I want to spin the car, you can see how easy it is. Just add a little bit of brakes and steering at the same time. This corner is actually a very good exercise to practice your light hands technique under braking, especially in this car, because it is very, very, very easy to spin under braking. So you have to work on your precision. If you brake a little bit too much, immediately spin. If you turn a little bit too much, immediately spin. So you have to find that precise combination between the brakes and the steering to get the car to do the closing spiral as you're getting into the corner and turning more and 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 more until the maximum rotation point, and then get back on power and exit the corner. So this is how this technique looks in real life. As soon as I start braking, boom, immediately relaxing my hands, and you can actually see the steering moving a little bit left and right. That's just the car adapting itself to the ABS, to the undulations under braking, to the bumps. I'm literally not applying any force at this point. See, it really wiggles a lot. And then now when I start turning in, I'm turning in with light hands. So light, firm, light right now. And then because I'm still trail braking, the car is going on its own. And then as I release the brakes, now I can add more and more and more. Now this is the point where I'm forcing the steering the most. I get back on power. And then I'm now relaxing my hands, and you can see my adjustments as I relax my hands and let the car go all the way to the outside. And here's another good example, same thing. As soon as I start braking, fully light hands. Now I start very lightly, and now firm, 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 force the car, power, and now you can see the corrections. That big correction right there was not really me. It was just as soon as I get back on power and the car gets a little bit of traction control, you can feel the steering getting heavier and asking you to correct it for you as I let it go all the way to the outside. And here we have different car, different track, same pattern, double apex, light, 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 still trail braking. Now a lot more. As soon as I get back on power, I relax my hands and let it open and respect the grip of the car. Same thing here. I'm gonna start braking super light. You can see already this micro correction as soon as I turn in. That's because I'm relaxed enough to really talk to the steering, to the force feedback, and seeing what the car wants. I am trail braking. This car is very oversteery when you are trail braking. It's very easy to spin. And then here, now that I'm on power, half throttle, and then ramping up to 100%, you can see me forcing a little bit and then relaxing as I exit all the way to the outside. And then here, super relaxed hands initially, and then firm, get back on power, relax my hands, let it go wide. It's the same thing in all corners. As soon as you understand this pattern, everything that you work on kind of fits this bucket of light, firm, light. So trail braking, V-shape versus U-shape, the elevation changes, everything that you do with the car, the setup changes, all of that is going to be easier if you have this pattern in your brain of every time you shift weight to the front tires, you relax your hands more. And then exactly the same pattern, light, firm, light, works. It works. It's just an interesting way of dividing the corners and the way you communicate with the steering wheel as you're learning how to drive better. I hope this video was useful. If you really like the style, just recording as we go and showing you guys everything in real time, let me know in the comments and then I'm gonna make more of them. See ya. If you're a racing driver, you probably don't know what is actually slowing you down. You're watching on boards, you're doing laps, you're trying everything. But without a clear system, you waste time just reinforcing your bad driving habits. The Motor Racing Checklist is my complete online course that gives you a step-by-step plan to fix your technique and gain real performance in the car. Our Almeida Racing Academy has over 11,000 drivers. Go through it just once, you will feel the difference. And if you don't improve, I'll give you your money back.